Loungers. Welcome back to another episode of the City Lounge. You're with your host, DJ Mary B. And if it's your first time, please remember to like, subscribe, share, and comment. And if you're back, what it do, Loungers, what it do. So today's episode is going to be amazing. I have a special guest, Curtis Vermont. He's going to come talk to us the importance of, voting, us being the change. So stay tuned because you don't want to miss it. Hey Loungers, welcome. I am here with my special guest that I was telling you guys about today, Mr. Curtis Vermont.
Hey, what's going on?
How are you, Kurt?
I'm doing well.
I am so excited for this conversation because I feel like it is so necessary. I feel like you're gonna drop so many gems, and I feel like you're going to educate us. I feel like I'm in school.
Well, don't set me up for failure, but I'll do my best. I'll do my best.
That's how confident I am in you. So I want you to introduce yourself and the many hats that you wear.
Yeah, no problem. So, as a bit of background, my career is actually in business development. Over the course of 7 years between 2013, 6-7 years, between 2013 and just over 2019, or 2019, I generated $6 million in revenue for the companies I worked for. So we're talking about fields across telecom, ad tech, the digital space, and I'm actually losing track of my wording here, but and premium publishing as well.
Yeah.
Right. But all throughout that time, and even before then, quite frankly, I always had an interest, a deep love for policy and politics, because I learned at a very early age from my father and other sources, right? Barack Obama was a great inspiration as well, that, if you want to make change, and, we coming from the hood, we acknowledge how much we have not received in terms of support. And so, that was a part of my upbringing. So it's like, listen, if we want to get more resources, we have to advocate for change. And if we have to advocate for change, we have to understand how the system works, right? So that was my kind of introduction to policy and politics. I was really lucky in high school that in my last year, they started a politics course. It was brand new. They wanted to try a pilot program, right? And the rest was history. I went to York for poli-sci as well, right? Fast forward to the future now, apart from doing business though, I always wanted to make sure that I was doing something for my community, and that work, the actual work, started in 2018. Okay,
so take us on that journey of how you got into that, because I know you said you went to school. Shout out to Cedar Brae. That was the high school that you went to.
That's right. Cedar Brae, yeah.
Because I remember after Pope, that's where I used to go see my friends.
Yeah,
and you
BK
were
was
there.
the spot, fam.
Yes.
That was business deals happened there, fam. Are you kidding me? That was the networking spot.
Markham and Lawrence.
Hundo.
So take us on the journey of, you did go to Cedar Brae, you did go to York, and then how you got into the field of that politician field.
Yeah. So, it was actually 2017. I said 2018. I was misspeaking there. 2017. I knew that there was a provincial election coming up, where the governing party at the time, the Liberal Party, they would have a hard time. So if there's any time to get involved with policies and a party you most believe in, and I say most for specifically, I'll get back to that in a second.
Yeah.
That's when you show your mettle. That's when you show your worth, because you're not there to freeload. You're not there to say, "Oh, we're winning and I'm taking the credit for it." No, you're going to put the work in,
yes,
right? So I actually went to a meeting at UTSC. Funny enough, there was Mitzi Hunter there, who was the cabinet minister for education, I think, at the time. There was a few people who actually became my friends. Basically, the meeting was, to connect with people in the community and see how we can work with them to win the election, essentially, right?
Yes.
To mobilize people. So I went to one of the organizers, I said, who had asked if there's anybody who can offer their professional assistance on a campaign, let us know. I'm like, yo.
That's you.
That's me. So at the time, my business development background, it really isn't a lot of tech stuff, digital stuff, social media, and communications, excuse me.
That's okay.
I'm forgetting we're not on a podcast, we're recording live. But I'm used to doing the podcast thing.
I know, we're going to slip that in just now.
Right. So yeah, the rest was kind of history. It's like, look, I can help from a social media standpoint, from a digital standpoint, from a communication standpoint. Let me connect you to the right person. They connected me to this young guy who was kind of responsible for the region at the time. And it was like, look, we have to have people on this provincial liberal association, this board. We have to have young people on this board who can steer it in the right direction and who can help bring forth a successful campaign. Would you like to be part of that? Absolutely. So first, it started with me being elected onto the board as a director, right? And then in a few months' time, after showing my capabilities, particularly with digital work, I was brought on, or I was, what's the word, elected? Appointed. I was appointed as head of communications. So I ran everything for the campaign. Anything that you saw from the candidate Chin Lee, I was the one who put that out on his behalf, right? Unfortunately, we lost that election. The entire party did very poorly, right? It was just not a good time for us for multiple reasons. But the work didn't stop there, right? I'm still on that same board. So by the way, the Scarborough North Provincial Liberal Association, I had earlier said that we're in it. Literally, Shepherd, that's it, and above.
What?
So we're not quite in it, Shepherd and above.
Wait. So all of this
Actually, no, I lied. No, it's the highway. So
I was just gonna say, all of this is like, that's how close we are to where you guys run the head. Wow, I didn't know that.
We're actually out of the Chinese Cultural Center.
See, I didn't know. I don't think you guys knew that either. So we're on the same board, and I want you to tell us about the experience of you being on that campaign, kind of getting thrown into it and helping them. How were you able to? You were telling me about the other organizations and the other associations that you're involved with that we could reach out to when we need change. So tell us about that. Sure.
So in terms of, the fact. So you kind of asked two different questions there. Which one do you want to know?
Okay, so tell us about the different organizations and the associations that you're a part of.
Okay.
And how you got involved into that.
So there's a number of different organizations, and the reason why it's important to know about them is because a lot of people, not just black people, right, will say, we don't have the time to care about what our governments are doing. We don't have the time, and it's true. We're taking care of kids. We're busting our ass at work, right? And the time that we do have, we want to relax and spend it with our loved ones, right? I understand that completely. And so what I would say in response to folks who say, well, what can we do, even if we don't have the capacity, we don't have the time? There are a multitude of organizations that are out there that are doing the work already, and all they really need is for you to take part in the process.
And
right?
How do we do that?
So for example, I have an organization, I just incorporated it, so the work is actually just beginning.
Yes.
But it's called the Afro-Canadian Political Literacy Foundation, or ACPL for short, right? Part of our focus is going to be on policy and advocacy that affects the black community, particularly millennials, right?
Yes.
So we haven't touched on it yet, but housing, I'm sure we're going to get to that.
Yes.
That's a major issue within not only our community, but millennials across the board, right?
Yes.
Housing is just far too expensive. So that's an example of how an organization with their expertise can advocate on an issue, right? Through, for example, hiring people to do research, using that research to write reports, bringing that report to government, using that report to advocate for a policy shift from government, right? And then what is crucial to have in terms of people supporting, for example, the ACPL, or Lead Now, which is another one, or SETSI, which is another one.
Yes.
Is these organizations can then turn back and say, look, these are my people behind me. This is what we need, fam. We're 1,000, 10,000 strong. So this is a large constituent, which is an actual word in government. We are a large group that you have to pay attention to.
Yes.
Right? So it's really important to essentially work in numbers to accomplish policy changes. So that's what you want to know about the SETSIs. Again, that's the social economy through social inclusion. They're based out in the West. My good friend Victor Beausoleil is the executive director of that organization. He's actually out in Ghana right now. There's organizations like Acres. Again, we're going to talk about real estate later on, but that's the Afro-Canadian Real Estate Society,
Okay.
right? We got ACBL, Afro-Canadian, ACBA, Afro-Canadian Business Association. I mean, there are plethora of organizations
there's just so
within
much
our community
that
alone.
we didn't even know. So we definitely have to leave the links down below. And you were saying that, you know, if we come together and we show them like, hey, you got to pay attention to us, what can we do? Law-abiding citizens like myself, how can we support you guys in that? What do we do? Do we give you guys like, hey, this is what needs to be changed? How do we show up for each other? Can you let us know how we can support you guys in that?
And that's a very good question. I mean, the biggest thing is that when we put the call out for support, you come to support. So for example, if we're putting on events or some sort of a showcase where we are discussing our issues to bring about, change, right? Be there. Because the numbers matter, right?
Okay.
I can bring a very good example of that. So again, I told you about Victor Beausoleil and his work through SETSI. He actually didn't do this through SETSI, but anyway, Victor was responsible for, if you remember how carding was a thing in Ontario, it kind of still is, but carding has been curtailed significantly because of the process to curtail it. And the process to curtail it included Victor's group organizing basically these sessions all across Ontario. So not just here in Toronto, not just here in Scarborough like they did at Tropicana, right? And I was there, but we're talking about Thunder Bay, right? And Sudbury, where there's also a strong contingent of Black people, right? And the whole point was to have an open forum to share how Black people have been impacted negatively by carding. And all of that was contributory to getting carding changed.
Yes.
You feel me? So that's an example,
so
right?
We basically have to come out of our houses, show up, like, be there. Because I think, do you guys have to like sign something or people actually get the platform?
Sometimes there are petitions, sometimes, yes. And to be clear, you don't always have to show up for petitions. Sometimes there are many petitions that are done online.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
That's a big thing too. So there are two different things there. But whether it's online, digital, or physical, you got to show up, support your organizations that are supporting you, right? There are many organizations that have membership, right? So you pay a monthly due, maybe $5, $10, probably nothing more than $20. That supports the work, right? So if you had that kind of, not everybody does, but if you got that kind of money, support, because again, they are supporting you, right?
Yes.
So that's my perspective on that.
Okay, well, I like that, and I really hope that people take away from that the many different organizations that Kurt just mentioned, because we need to support our own so that they can be advocating for us, so that we can have these executions, so that they just take us seriously. You know what I'm saying? We can talk about, we want change, but like we have to do our part amongst ourselves as well.
We have to be organized. Doing our part, the main thing is being organized, right? And being organized is having organizations that are working on your behalf and working in unison, right?
So let us know a little bit about laws and legislation, because you did let us know your role in what you do and what you're doing and how you're advocating for us. Let us know a little bit about the laws and legislation and how that plays a part, because I know you were telling me like, in order for things to happen, there's laws and legislation, right? So tell us a little bit about background about that before we get into the housing and everything.
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, I'm the president for the Scarborough North Liberal Association. Also, I'm on the board for the committee, I should say, for policy and advocacy for the Scarborough Business Association, right? So those are two examples of where policy actually happens. And people don't think about it, and that's fine, because they wouldn't know unless they've actually taken it upon them to study that, or et cetera, right? So those two examples, that's where, as a group, for example, we can say, well, we think that there should be a policy that supports people no matter if they're working or not. It gives them a set amount of money every single month, so that, again, if they're not working, cool, they ain't got to worry, just like how a lot of people through this pandemic have been on CERB or CRB, right? If they can't work, they can be home, they can figure their life out until that program runs its course, right? So what if there could be a program like that was in place all the time? There are programs like that, they're in place in different places in the world, called universal basic income. Well, what we can do in a committee like the Scarborough North Provincial Liberal Association, which we already have, or the SBA, which it wouldn't happen there. But let's say the PLA, right? We would write legislation to reflect what we're trying to implement. And that's an entire process of its own. But that's where it happens. You don't really, like, if you weren't a part of this board, you'd have to send the legislation to the board and the board would send it off.
Okay.
So this is where the meat happens.
Okay.
Right? So you create the legislation, you're already a part of a party, and usually a party is what is going to govern the province after an election, right?
Okay.
After they win an election. So you're a part of a party, you create the legislation, you send it off to the party, and the party considers it. And what happens every year or every few years is what's called a annual general meeting, right? A policy convention.
Yeah.
And that's when the policy is adopted. And if it's adopted and that party becomes government, then the policy is adopted across the board.
Okay.
And now, for example, we can have UBI, which is what I was just talking about. An example of policy and how it affects many in our community. Just one example, the fact that cannabis is now legalized. So somebody in the Liberal Party before 2015, I think it was actually 2012, probably over a series of years, said, you know what? Fuck this, we should be legalized.
Yes, legalize it.
Okay, but how you do that? Well, we got to write legislation to support the fact that, well, this is why we think it should be legalized, and this is what, here are the reasons to support it.
Yeah.
Here are the benefits. Yes, here are the drawbacks, but we can figure that out. This is what legislation is all about. Like I just mentioned, it goes to the party now. The party considers it. Okay, yeah, we think this is cool. They form government. Weed is legalized. So that's how important policy is. And that's why you want to be a part of the process so that, for example, with weed being legalized, an initial problem, and it still is a problem, is that a lot of pardons weren't, or quite frankly, weed was legalized, there were lots of people locked up for weed.
For weed, yes.
Right? So now that process is kind of being fixed.
Okay.
But it's taken way too damn long.
Yeah,
right? And that speaks to the fact that many of us, we were not at the table. We were not at the table as we should have been.
For that part of legalizing weed.
I mean, for all of it.
Yeah.
The point I'm trying to make here is that any part of legislation that impacts us, we need to be a part of it so that it speaks to our needs as well.
Yeah.
Right? Which goes back to supporting organizations that are getting involved with, developing legislation or motions and things of that nature, right? So that's what it's all about.
Well, I love that you were able to break that down, and I really hope that people are taking away from this, because I feel like, you giving us the blueprint of how we can get our voices heard and our concerns out there, this is free game, right?
I mean,
You're letting us know how we can be a part of it, so I really appreciate that. And then I wanted to jump into funding for the Black community and a little bit about Wes Hall.
Can I say one thing?
Sure.
On the concept of supporting other organizations, I started the ACPL because I saw a gap. I literally just incorporated it the other day. It doesn't cost a lot of money to incorporate a non-for-profit, and you can make your non-for-profit about whatever you want it to be. You can make your corporation about whatever you want it to be. The point I'm making is, if you see that there's a gap, if you see that something needs to be fixed, and maybe somebody else isn't doing something about it, or not as well as you think they could be, you can do something about it too.
Because remember, we were both talking and we're like, the change starts with us.
The change starts with us.
Right?
You can't depend on other people.
You cannot. So you seen something, you seen there was a gap,
100%.
and you started your own organization.
100%.
Right? So this, guys, free game, okay? If there's anything that you want to change or anything that you have concerns about or any questions, this is who you need to reach out to, because you have all the information and you're gonna lead us to finally making that change. I really feel like we don't believe that we can do that because we never had somebody that looks like us to say, hey, you can do that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, and it's not just about us as Black people, but I think it's like you said, it's millennials, us across the board,
sure.
Everybody watching this. It doesn't matter who you are, it doesn't matter your culture. You can make change wherever you see that gap. So I wanted to touch on to a little bit about Wes Hall and the funding in the Black community. I don't know which one you want to do first.
It's up to you. I guess we can start with Wes Hall.
Yeah, let's start about Wes Hall, because you did say that he's very significant, and I wanted you to let us know, because some people don't know about him, so we need to know a little bit about Wes Hall and
Yeah, so Wes Hall, the reason why he's significant is because, and this is particularly for those from Jamaica, but maybe broadly from the Caribbean, right?
Yes.
Wes Hall is probably one of the richest Canadian Jamaicans living here in Toronto, and it's not the fact that he's rich, it's a question of how he got there and his story, right, and what he does now, right? To paint the picture that anything is possible. Yes, even here. Wes Hall was born in, was it Trelawney, Jamaica? I forget exactly where it was, but he was raised by his grandmother with 9 other siblings, right, in a shack, right? He eventually made his way to Canada to live with his father and his stepmother and that family. He went to school to, I think it was to be a law clerk, I believe. But through his work, he decided, you know what, I want to work in proxies, right? So that's essentially all the paperwork with corporations. He wanted to work in that field, right? He was so good at this work that he ended up at a company as VP of Business Development. And I should actually back up, because before he even got there, this is a guy who was, working in the mailroom on Bay Street, working security. He was hustling, man. He was going at it. And even he tells his story. He'd be in the mailroom and he'd be suited up, and people would say, "Yo, why you suited up?" And essentially he'd be like, "Yo, it's about where I'm going," right? He didn't really speak like that at the time, but that's essentially what his mindset was. He wanted to be seen for where he wanted to be.
I love that.
And that's actually what happened, right? He ended up, he made networking. So as a mail boy, he'd be going around giving the mail to folks, networking as he's doing that. Over time now, you can make some conversation, maybe you're asked an opinion on something, and he took that opportunity and boom, right? So he used that. Now he's VP of Business Development for this firm. He realizes at this firm things are going well, but the lifestyle ain't it for him. It's not it for him. He's if you're in business development, you got to be out all times of night. You're hosting your clients, right? You're always traveling, or at least 40% of the year. It's hectic. You can't. There's not a lot of stability. It's great for a young guy or a young woman too, right? Great for a young person. You want stability? Nah. And he's a family man. That's a big thing about him. So he said, you know what? I'm going to start my own firm. Started his business plan. It was an immaculate business plan, and you know that based on the fact that he is a multi-billionaire.
He is now,
right? The banks would not give him a loan. They would not. He went to his own bank. He went to that bank. So his own bank, I believe, he has his CIBC. He went to RBC as well. He went to T. He went everywhere. Couldn't get it. Down on his luck, he went back to his own bank. He went to, I believe, a black mortgage agent within CIBC. He's like, "Yo, fam, help me." Dude's like, "Okay, I think what we can do is, put your house up for collateral, use that as your business, as your funding for your business." And the rest is history. This is now the man who, so here's an example of how I can say he made his money. He is responsible for the biggest mergers and acquisitions in North America. His company is literally number 4. They're called Kingsdale Advisors. Number 4 in North America, number 1 in Canada. In terms of the examples of mergers and acquisitions that he's responsible for, Burger King and Tim Hortons.
Wow, I didn't even know that.
Right? And there's plenty of other major examples too, but that's in everything's head, right? So, and this. I mean, listen, I had the opportunity to interview him on my podcast, The Drip. I think it was maybe last month, 2 months ago, and I've known him for a few years. He's a really solid and good person. He's solid. And what I'm getting at is, this is a person who exudes confidence and who is willing to go to bat for the black community, as he has been doing. But he's also, he's so personable. You know what I mean? And that's very important in a person. So we bring up Wes Hall because he's an example of someone who you can emulate, possibly, right? But it's really important to know of people in our community who maybe have got, been where we've been, and they can help us on our path as well.
Yep, I agree with that 100%, you know, and that's why we have platforms like The Drip and City Lounge, because you want to show people it's not how you started. It's just like
never.
You wanted people to show where you're going, it's where you're headed, the things that you've been through. And I love his story because that's a lot of us. You get what I'm saying? It's a lot of us. You know what I mean?
Listen, I'll say, like, people can look at his documentary on YouTube. His story is, I mean, he's got dead brothers. Like, he has a story. So if someone like him can make it, many of us can do it as well.
And I think it's so important that we know people on a different level.
For sure.
On a human level.
On a human level.
On a human level.
Especially powerful people.
Yes. You have to, because you have to be, these are people that are inspiring you. And I feel like the way you can inspire people is through being relatable. It's being transparent. So I would definitely be looking at his documentaries, because I love a documentary.
Yeah.
I really do. And you did talk about your podcast. So let us know a bit about The Drip and what it is that you advocate for.
Yes. So thank you for bringing up The Drip. The Drip is basically the voice of the ACPL.
Yes.
We've been on the air now for just over a year. We actually started being focused on the pandemic.
Yeah.
So what we wanted to do is inform people about news about the pandemic so they can make important decisions by using actual news sources, right? While also informing them about policy and economics and things of that nature, because that's our background and we know lots of folks who want to hear that kind of content.
Exactly.
We pivoted as of May because of George Floyd's murder, as well as the murder of Regis Korchinski-Paquette and plenty of others, and we said, yo, enough is enough, and we got to speak from our perspective unequivocally.
Yeah. Unapologetically.
And unapologetically.
Man, for sure.
And so we started doing that, you know, the rest is kind of history in that, you know, we're right now hovering around like 1,100 to 1,500 listeners per month. Sometimes it fluctuates.
That's good.
But in March, BuzzFeed, which many people know as a major publication, right? They put out a ranking essentially of audiobooks and podcasts and things of that nature that all Black Canadians should hear. So they had a ranking of 21, and they ranked us number 4 on that list.
Dope.
And just to put into perspective, you know, Desmond Cole, he's kind of an issue right now in the community, but in terms of his reach, he was number 1.
Okay.
And we were number 4.
I love that you guys are number 4, and I love that they had that ranking. And I would agree that your podcast is definitely something to listen to, because even in our pre-interview, y'all don't even know, but Kurt freaking schooled me on so many things, and I'm just thinking like, yo, I think sometimes we don't want, I'm one of those people, I'm an empath, so when I listen to the news, I will take on the stories and everything, but it's good to listen to people like, you're my friend. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? It's just like listening to your podcast, oh, this is my friend schooling me, teaching me, you know what I mean?
But so you can actually speak to the fact that, you know, because listening to the news, it can be very heavy, and you know what? We speak about heavy stories on the podcast, don't get me wrong, right? But the way that we deliver is what makes people keep coming back, quite frankly. And it's why we have such a strong millennial audience, because we're speaking in our voice.
Exactly, in our terms.
In our terms.
Because when I was listening to one of your episodes, you're like, oh yeah, so like, how do you feel about that? And then she said how she felt. You want to shout out your co-host?
Patience Adamu.
Yes. So when I was listening to it, you were like, yeah, like, how do you feel about that? And she gave her opinion. And then she's like, yeah, you know, that's crazy. Like, and I'm like, oh shoot, that's something I would say to my girlfriend.
You were like, yo, we say, yo, that's nuts.
Exactly. It's relatable. It's relatable. And I think that's why it's important to have platforms the way that we have, because not all the time, honestly, I would take news from you over there, because they be using big words. I'm sorry guys, but you know, you were able to send me some articles, and I was able to read it, and then you were able to explain it to me, and I really appreciate you for that. And before we go, I want to touch on the articles.
Sure.
Let's touch on that shortly, you know, a little time that we have, because it is a big thing, the housing market.
Housing is
and I know we said we're going to touch on that.
It's mad expensive out there, fam.
So break it down as to why this is going on, and the difference, because we seen the difference between last year with the pandemic starting and now. So take us on that journey there.
Yeah, I mean, so to start, I mean, you saw for yourself, right? Was it 47.1% or whatever? Almost 50% since the beginning of the pandemic till now is how much more expensive housing has increased.
Yes.
It's gone 50% more, or almost 50% more expensive.
From the beginning of the pandemic.
Till now. Now,
Crazy.
the reason for that, there's a lot of reasons, and it's important to not rush the understanding of that, right? But I'll try my best to be quick. So essentially, when the pandemic initially hit, prices actually dropped.
Okay.
And so there were a lot of people, if the question is why are things so expensive now? Prices actually dropped. So a lot of people who already own property, maybe mom and dad already helped them buy a small condo and things like that. Well, so essentially they had, I'm being unclear. People particularly downtown who had condos, right? Because of the pandemic, now they're saying, yo, I can't be in this box. And because they actually own this condo, they have equity in this condo, they can take that and they can buy something else out in Whitby or maybe not Markham, that's expensive, but somewhere else, right? Somewhere, Oshawa, et cetera, right? And that's what a lot of people did. So that was a big part of it.
Okay.
Another big part of it though, and this was a policy, this was an effective policy, was governments all around the world, because right now it's not just Canada. Canada is actually the third hottest market right now. There's New Zealand, then Sweden, then Canada in terms of, and then there's also the UK that's fourth, and then the US that's fifth. So markets all across the world. Everybody's mad expensive because all of our central governments decided, yo, we have to do something to keep the economy going, and the best way to keep the economy going is to keep people buying houses. Because when people buy houses, it affects so much more across the board.
Yeah.
You see what I mean? So with the economy tanked because of COVID, they had to now inject a lot of activity into the market, make it easier. So they brought down rates, for example. Make it easier now for people to afford a mortgage. So now people who couldn't necessarily afford before, now they can take on more debt. So now they're going to go buy more property, just like I mentioned before.
Yes.
And so the process repeats and repeats itself.
Yes.
That's normal. But what's a little abnormal as well is that in this process, and remember you read about this in one of the articles, right? Within this process, there are what's called blind bidding.
Yes.
Right? And so let's say that a
was the part that I was like,
let's say that a property is $500,000.
Yeah.
Right? And there's 5 bidders for this property. If the first person bids $515, right now the system, there's no transparency on what that person bid. You can be told as the second bidder, yo, that person bid like $600,000, or quite frankly, this is what happens. You're thinking, yo, the market's going crazy. I got to just scoop up what I can. Right, so I'm going to give as high
as you can.
Right? So because there's no kind of threshold to block that, instead of giving like $515 over $500, now people are giving like $575 over $500. And again, there are people who have this money. There's a lot of people investing from overseas.
Yes.
Let's be clear about that. There was a report that just came out that said it's about 20%. That's huge. So
overseas.
20% are investors.
Okay.
And I'm sure the majority of them are overseas investors. Okay. So let's be clear about that. Yeah. But we have a system where there's now a whole bunch of people that have access to more money, and now they can buy more property, and that shoots the price up. And they're blind bidding, and they're bidding ridiculous amounts of money. So until that is stopped, as just one example,
we're screwed.
We're just gonna keep. Now, here's the thing that I should also mention.
Because you're saying with millennials, are we screwed?
Millennials are gonna have to be creative. I had to be creative, right? I didn't buy by myself. There was family involved, right?
Yes,
so we all got to be creative. And there's groups, I mentioned ACRES already, the Afro-Caribbean Real Estate Association. They're here to help with being creative as well.
Love that.
But sorry, what was your question?
No, I was saying we were just talking about the housing, and then I kind of jumped in and said millennials, but you were saying something about if everything is so expensive right now, but the investors, the 20%, and then you kind of.
Essentially, what I laid out were the reasons for why things are so expensive.
Yes.
What I was getting at was, we were in this very same process after the last recession, right?
Okay.
The recession that happened after 2008.
Okay.
So we were in this very same place around 2014.
Okay.
And the Bank of Canada did the same thing, right? And prices fell after that. So it's still possible that millennials aren't entirely screwed. Things could revert back, and there are policy options to get it that way. So again, that's why it's important to support your local organizations that are doing the work, right?
Ooh, I like how you swindled that in there.
Yeah, that plug-in.
Yeah, I love that plug-in. So guys, there's still hope for us to get houses after all. Okay, so reach out. Can you put in your organization one more time? Plug it in. Let people know about your podcast. Thank you so much for enlightening us and giving us all that background stuff to everything that's going on, letting us know that where we can go, where we can reach out, how we can make a change, because that is why I wanted to bring you on here, because I needed to hear it from your mouth, because I know that is your area. So let us know, everybody know the platforms and where they can reach out to you, and we will leave the different organizations and funding underneath. So the floor is yours.
So first and foremost, there's the ACPL, the Afro-Canadian Political Literacy Foundation. You're not going to find anything online yet.
Okay.
But the voice of the ACPL is the drip. You will find that on any podcast platform.
Yes.
We are on social media, so you can access us there as well. And of course, ACPL will be online soon, so you'll be able to see that. In terms of other organizations, take a look at SETC.
Okay.
Take a look at ACRES, so Afro-Canadian Real Estate Association. Take a look at ACBA, the Afro-Canadian Business Association. Take a look at the Black Chamber of Commerce.
Okay.
There's another group. So these are just some examples of organizations that people can support that are supporting them.
Okay. And does the drip have Instagram? Do you have your Instagram? So we can leave that there. We're going to leave all those organizations, like I said, below. But where can they find you? What's your Instagram handle? So we can leave that there as well.
The Drip TO.
The Drip TO.
Yep.
And in that note, thank you, Kurt, for coming, dropping your gems. Thank you, loungers, for tuning in. I really hope you got as much information as I did. This was an amazing episode. And, it starts with us, guys. All right? See you next episode.